I'm Nicola O'Conner from the Department for Energy and Climate Change. If you saw outside that it says Michelle Frew, she's actually here tomorrow. So if you want to hear whether her presentation is different than mine, come along tomorrow, hear about the Green Deal twice. So I work in I'm one person in quite a large team of scientists, economists and policy advisors who are all working hard to put together the new Green Deal initiative, which is really the government's flagship new energy efficiency program. And I just wanted to come along to InstallerLive today and say a few words about what it means, and particularly what it might mean for the installer side of things. So I'm just going to cover what it is, why we even need it in the first place, and what it could mean for you. We've got quite a short session, so there won't be very long for questions at the end. If you do have questions, if you want to jot them down on a bit of paper, leave them on your seat, and I'll take them away with me. I think there's a survey going out at the end of the conference, and I'll try to make sure I answer everybody's questions in that survey. So look out for that. Okay then, first things first, the science. I sound like a L'Oreal advert. Obviously, we've got carbon budgets, legally binding carbon budgets that we need to meet. That's going to require quite deep cuts in carbon emissions, and energy efficiency is obviously a huge part of that. We know that the way people use energy in their homes, how they heat the homes, makes a significant contribution to their own personal emissions. So in the building sector, we need to quite dramatically reduce the emissions. And the Green Deal is going to be a big part of that. But this is one program, and we know that there's quite a lot of things, quite a lot of barriers that get in the way of people actually making energy efficiency improvements to their homes. So even if I think about myself, I'm reasonably well informed about this kind of policy area and the kinds of impacts that we might see. And even then, you know, there's certain measures that I might do to my property, get a new boiler, get better windows, but there's other things that may not have even crossed my mind at all. Thinking about things like flue gas heat recovery devices, getting a new heat pump rather than a standard boiler. And really on the insulation side as well, we know that some people are just completely not engaged in the issue at all. So we really want the Green Deal to kind of, this government program along with industry, to really kind of showcase the benefits and particularly the kind of savings that customers might see on their fuel bills, to make it a really attractive proposition. Now what's slightly different about the Green Deal, maybe compared to other initiatives, is that the Green Deal is trying to look at the whole property and say what is everything that property needs in order to make it have a really good energy performance. So we'll be looking across all of the property and then trying to make it attractive to do everything that's needed. So this is where the Green Deal comes in. And I really can't stress enough, I don't know whether most people have probably heard a bit about the Green Deal, but ministers really, this is high on their agenda. It's going to be coming in next October, and between now and then we'll be working with people like yourselves and putting together the legal framework to make it work. So essentially, what is it? What actually is it? The Green Deal is really a financing mechanism. It means we can take some of the upfront cost out of installation work for the customer. So it's essentially a nationwide pay-as-you-save scheme. So if I decide to get 5 or 6 improvements to my property, maybe it's energy efficient lighting, better windows, a new boiler, and my cavity walls insulated, that's going to save me money on my fuel bill. What the Green Deal does is get money flowing around the system so that we can use those future savings and pay for the upfront cost of the installation. So that's essentially how it works. So in terms of the amount of money we might be talking about here, well, it'll vary from property to property depending on what you need. But essentially, if a package of measures might save you £500 a year, and you've got a 20-year Green Deal plan, that equates to about £10,000. So the value of the installation work might be around that. And we often hear ministers quoting that figure as well. So the Green Deal is really there to try and remove one of the financial barriers for people taking up these kind of improvements. But that isn't all that's needed. Obviously, there are lots of reasons why people don't do this kind of work. And there are lots of opportunities as well to kind of trigger action. So we can think about regulation and what regulation might underpin this kind of financial incentive. And some of that is happening already. For example, regulating the private rented sector. We can look at fiscal incentives, and things like stamp duty, council tax, and say, well, how can we better reward people for doing this type of work? But I think it's not just that. I think it's installers in people's properties making improvements. You're there with customers. This is a real opportunity to say, well, actually, there's this thing called a Green Deal. You can get a whole range of other things done to your property at no upfront cost. So we really need the Green Deal to work together with other initiatives and with the way the supply chain works at the moment to try and really drive up this installation work. So just to break it down a little bit further then, we tend to think of the Green Deal as like a customer journey. So if I'll take myself as an example. A customer in October 2012, I hear about this thing called the Green Deal. It may be through marketing from companies that are involved. I may have spotted it on a government website. There may be someone come around to do some works on my kitchen, and they tell me about it. So the marketing and coordination aspect, we want government and industry working together to really promote this idea. The next thing that happens then, very slickly I'm sure, is I have to have an assessment of my property done. So this is really a physical assessment, similar to the type of assessment you get now with an energy performance certificate being the output at the end. So someone, an approved Green Deal assessor, will come around to my house, measure it up, look at the type of construction, look at what kind of things I've already got in there, what's my boiler like, have I had my loft insulated to the correct level, and then produce essentially a report, an energy performance certificate to say how efficient my property already is, but also, very importantly for the Green Deal, the range of things that I could now do to improve the energy performance. It will tell me how much money I can be expected to save in pounds, and it'll tell me how much carbon as well. And then I get an energy performance rating. The next thing that happens, I can take my assessment to what we're calling a Green Deal provider. Now, this is a new entity being created to help get the finance flowing around the system. So the Green Deal provider will look at my assessment report, and at this stage we really want to encourage people to take up as many of the measures that have been recommended as possible, but they don't have to. So I will be looking at this and saying, well, actually, I'd quite like to get my windows done now, I'd quite like to get my insulation done, but my boiler has got another 2 years left on it, I'll wait for that. So I essentially get a quote from the Green Deal provider for how much that work will cost and essentially the kind of plan for delivering it. And installers at this stage will then come in, do the installation work. I'll say a little bit more about that, how that might happen in a second. The work's done, and then the next thing I'll see is my next energy bill will have a Green Deal charge written on it. Now, the really important thing about the Green Deal is this thing called the Golden Rule. The estimated energy savings that I can expect to get, I can never have more finance than that. So essentially, I should either see my fuel bills going down almost immediately or over time, but certainly never going up as a result of the Green Deal. So we see this as well as me being able to get a warmer, more efficient house to live in. It's actually helping to guard against fuel bill rises as well. Just a couple of more details then about the assessment. So I've said already that the output is an EPC with a rating, and this basically tells you how good your home or business is. And I think the key thing just to emphasize again is that this is telling you everything that you should be doing to your property. It's not particular individual companies saying, oh, we think you need this type of measure, whether it's PV or insulation. The second thing just to say about it is impartial. This means that a bit like when you go and have your eyes tested at an optician's, you can have the test done. That is a record of what kind of glasses you need. You can then go to any shop to buy your glasses. You may choose to buy it from the same shop, but we're not forcing that to happen. So this will introduce some competition in the market, and it will open up, it'll mean that customers have choice. So what kind of measures can actually get recommended? Well, we want the Green Deal to be as broad and as all-encompassing as possible. So we're looking to cover about 30 different measures. Now, some of those will have more savings than others, and that inevitably means that some measures will entirely pay for their installation cost over time, and others won't. But that's fine. Even for those that don't completely pay for themselves, you can still get some finance towards them. So in terms of the types of measures, we've got microgeneration measures in there, PV, solar thermal, we've got heat pumps, insulation measures, upgrade boilers, lighting, glazing, the range of things that you would expect to see. And essentially the main criteria is, can this measure improve the energy performance of a building? If it can, then it has the potential to save you money on your fuel bill, and therefore the potential to be financed under the Green Deal. The second thing is, because we require this assessment up front, that really means that we're trying to make sure the measures getting recommended are appropriate for that property. So that means the measures, the way they perform, the kinds of savings you can see from them, we need to understand that at a scientific level. So they need to be modeled in the assessment tool. The third thing is the actual products that will get installed under the Green Deal. We need to make sure that they're high quality. And obviously, that always matters. We always should be striving to have high quality products going. There's lots of laws already, particularly at European level, that tell you about the type of testing and certification that you have to do. We're going to recognize all of that and not go beyond it. But it's really important that when we're attaching finance to the savings you expect to see, that those savings can be realized. So there'll be a code of practice, and essentially it will tell manufacturers and suppliers what are the things they need to do to make their products Green Deal ready. The thing just to say here from the installer point of view is we want to make sure that installers are clear about which are the Green Deal products. So we're going to ask the manufacturers and suppliers to declare that their products are essentially Green Deal ready on the Green Deal market, and that just provides some clarity in this chain of events. So a little bit more about the finance then. As a consumer, obviously, it's really important what you see on your fuel bill. It's important that people have trust. The key thing about the financing mechanism is that it isn't a loan. It's a charge that will sit on your property, and this means that you can pay for the measures over long periods of time. So if you've got a Green Deal plan and it lasts for 20 or 25 years, this means essentially you're realizing savings on your fuel bill straight away. If you move house, then the next person moving in inherits the Green Deal charge. But what they also inherit is a more efficient property. So there's work going on in the team to make sure the disclosure requirements around that are all sound. The other thing is this Green Deal provider. This, as I said, is a new entity, And there's sometimes a bit of a mystery surrounding what Green Deal providers actually are. Essentially, they're a company or an organisation or a local authority, anybody really that wants to become a Green Deal provider, meet the requirements that we'll set out in a consultation. We've got installer companies looking at becoming this. We've got local authorities, energy companies, distributors, trade associations, financing companies. And the reason why this Green Deal provider is needed is they're the ones that draw in the finance and essentially make the contract with the customer over quite long periods of time. So in terms of Green Deal providers themselves, we're asking people to look at what the requirements are. It shouldn't be too onerous to become one. I guess ultimately it's a business choice about whether that's a route to go down. But we'd see installer companies pairing up with Green Deal providers to basically deliver the services. On the actual installation side of things then, we've been doing some customer research. A survey of around 2,000 customers was done a little while ago, households, and we're now doing a business survey as well. The Green Deal covers domestic and non-domestic properties. And one of the really strong messages starting to come through is that people really want to work with, have installers in their properties, either that they trust and know, that are local to their area, and that they're approved. Nearly every day at work I get phone calls from people saying, we've had this person round my house, is there a list somewhere that I can check they're approved? Now under the Green Deal we're going to have a list like that. But I think what we really, really want to make sure is that that doesn't become a huge burden for people like yourselves to get onto it. So one of the things, we're creating a Green Deal installation standard, and essentially this will draw on standards that already exist, and where people are already accredited under other schemes like competent person schemes, gas safe, MCS, we're looking at how we can recognise that kind of accreditation, and you become Green Deal, you can get your Green Deal badge at the same time. So obviously that will apply to installers who've already met the installation standard. So for many of you, it might mean there's nothing very much at all to do. For others, it might mean additional training if there's a particularly low level of standard in a sector. So I think what we'd encourage you to do here, work with trade associations. They'll be looking at what their own members need to do to get the Green Deal badge. They'll be looking at certifying the installers themselves, and the certification bodies will be listing the installer companies on the Green Deal list. So I think the message here as well is that we do need accredited installers under the Green Deal. The quality of the installation really matters, but we're trying to make it as simple as possible to achieve that. Okay, last couple of slides before we have questions. Just to say a few words about how the Green Deal fits in with other initiatives. Many of you may have heard of the CERT already. This is an energy supplier obligation that basically requires energy companies to make carbon emission savings through their customers, through energy efficiency improvements. The CERT's going to be coming to an end and will be replaced by a new energy company obligation. This will work in tandem with the Green Deal to really push certain types of measures where the financing doesn't work quite so well. I'm sure everyone here knows about feed-in tariffs and the FITs. The thing to say here is that the measures covered by the FITs, or many of them, will also be covered by the Green Deal. So really, while we may see customers continuing to choose the FITs in the short term, others may be more attracted to a kind of customer arrangement where there's no upfront cost. So the two things will complement each other. And we can imagine customers that are attracted to the FITs then being told about the Green Deal as well. they may decide to get their microgeneration measures on the FITs and their insulation work done on the Green Deal. So that can all work, and that's all possible. And pretty much the same goes for the renewable heat incentive as well. We really want to use these schemes to push each other. So we're expecting the domestic RHI to be launched alongside the Green Deal next October. Just lastly then, in terms of the actual timetable, the most important date obviously is we want to see the first Green Deals coming through in the autumn next year. We're working roughly to an October timetable. We can't absolutely guarantee the dates that it will happen, but around autumn next year. The next thing that's coming out is the Green Deal consultation. Fairly soon, towards the end of the month, early November. This will be a statement of the current policy proposal across the entire Green Deal. There'll be a section on installation in there and on the measures and products. So we'd encourage you to have a look at that and also send us a response if you're that way inclined. The third thing is the installer standard that's been developed. It's called PAS 2030. It's on the BSI's website at the moment. It's still a work in progress. We'll be looking to finalise the actual installation standard in January next year, and from doing that, to be clear about what any additional training requirements will need to be. And lastly then, we're going to be producing something that I'm calling at the moment the Green Deal Guide for Industry. So this is really a document that we want to produce with industry representatives that sets out in a really no-nonsense way what is the Green Deal, why is it a good thing to be involved in, and what do you need to do to get ready for it. So we're looking for that to come out around early February next year. So keep an eye out for that as well. But just a last thought from me, really. We in DECC definitely see the Green Deal as a good thing for individuals, you know, improvements to their property, helping out on the fuel bills. For obviously the economy and our climate change targets, a really important part of that story. But I think for industry, we know that during the recession we've seen a bit of a downturn, and we really want the Green Deal to help stimulate the market, and we really want to see it take off and drive the installation work. So I would just encourage you to get involved, have a look at the DECC website, and that's it from me. So any questions? I think we've got a mic at the back, otherwise I won't be able to hear you. I think we've just got 5 minutes for questions, yeah?
Okay. With regards to FITs, if you get an energy company to put PV on your roof, is there still FITs claimable, and do the FITs pay the Green Deal back for, say, the first 10 years, and then you as a householder benefit for the next 15 years? Or is there no FITs at all with the Green Deal?
The FITs and the Green Deal will still run. They can run side by side, but the two financing streams don't actually cross over. That would just start to become incredibly complicated. But what you can't do, if you entirely pay for something with Green Deal finance, you can't then get the FITs on top. So a customer will choose either the FITs or the Green Deal for the measures that are covered by both.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any more? Question here.
My question would be, who would be paying the assessors to do the surveys?
The question was who's paying the assessors. It's a good question. In the framework DECC has created, we don't specify the actual cost of the assessment at all. It's really down to the market. What we'll do is set the minimum requirements for what the assessors need to have been trained on. So they need to be able to work with the assessment tools to produce the actual EPC. That's quite obvious. But there'll be a second part to the assessment where they sit down with the householder or the business and talk through what their energy consumption patterns look like, and give them a bit of more personalised advice. So there will be a cost attached to that. At the moment, to produce an EPC, the costs vary depending on the company, but they're around £30 to £40. We might expect a Green Deal assessment to be around £50. And it's an interesting question about if a given company wants to hire assessors and installers and do all the work in a kind of one-stop shop type approach. Some are saying, well, we want to provide the assessment for free. Others are saying, actually, we don't want to provide the assessment for free because people tend to value what they pay for, and it's more likely to translate into actual work. So it is ultimately, it is the customer, but some companies may decide to kind of, as a marketing device, offer it for free. Okay. Any more questions? If you do want to write something down as well and leave it on the seat, I'll collect it in.
You said this finance was on the house, effectively. So if you sell the house, can you repay the finance?
The question is, can you repay the finance if you're selling the house? You can repay early if you choose, but I guess the unique thing about the Green Deal is the Green Deal charge passes on to the new occupant, so they take on the repayments, and they'll know about that before they buy the house.
Yes, but they may not want it.
Well,
who wants a loan these days? Everybody's trying to get rid of loans.
This is where the golden rule of the Green Deal comes in. It shouldn't make any difference to the actual fuel bill. The fuel bill is the mechanism for paying back the installation cost, but the amount of finance attached to the energy bill will never be greater than the value, the energy savings the measures can make. So whilst there is a charge attached to the property, what the new person moving in gets is a more efficient home. They're paying for something, but the fuel bill will be exactly what it would have been or less.
So this loan continues into perpetuity? There is no way of paying it off?
The longest we think Green Deal plans will last for is about 20 to 25 years, so it doesn't continue forever. At the start of the plan period, there'll be a calculation, basically. This is the value, this is the estimated savings for the package of measures, the improvement works that are going to be made. If you pay that over 15 years, the monthly or quarterly charge would be X. If you paid it over 25 years, it'd be another amount. So essentially, all that's happening is that recouping of the money is being brought forward and used to pay for the installation at the start, so the customer doesn't have to pay. So really, for new occupants, it shouldn't make any difference. But again, it's a personal choice. I'd be attracted to having a home that's warm and energy efficient, but I would say that.
Sounds like Paul Daniels' economies to me, but there we are.
Okay, any more questions? One last question, I think.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned earlier that there's a...
Sorry, I can't hear.
You mentioned earlier that there's a Green Deal guide for the industry coming out early February. Where can we get hold of that?
It'll be on DECC's website, so just Google DECC Green Deal and you'll be able to find it. It may be that we ask various trade associations and companies to link up to it as well, but at the very least, it'll be on DECC's website.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for coming along, and really good to see so many of you here.